Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those who are at the West Coast or in Alaska or Hawaii. My name is Krishan Arora. I'm a branch chief in the Networks and Development Program branch at the Division for Research Capacity Building. I currently also am the lead for the NARCH program. Some housekeeping rules. I would like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. Both the recording and the slides will be posted online at the NARCH website on the DRCP. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box or wait until the end of the presentation and we will have a Q&A session. So welcome to the NARCH pre-application webinar. Today we are going to talk about the recently released NARCH Notice of Funding Opportunity or NOFO PAR-23-166. NARCH program has S06 mechanism. So I'll be referring to this NARCH S06 in my talk so you understand that part. This is to differentiate from other NARCH programs that we are developing currently. For example, we recently published the Notice of Funding Opportunity for NARCH Planning Grants, which has R34 mechanism. And last week, we had a pre-application webinar for that program. So there are other programs under NARCH that we are developing right now and that will be available in the coming year. At this webinar, will participate in addition to myself, Michelle Magal, who is Acting Division Director for Division for Research Capacity Building. And also in attendance, we also have Kangsuk Gartrell, who is Program Officer in the Division for Research Capacity Building, and also Christy Lee, who is Team Leader for Grants Management, Grant Administration Branch. And she has answers to basically all the questions that relate to budgetary and fiscal matters. So all of us will be available to answer the questions after the presentation in a chat that's moderated by Michelle. In the meantime, if any questions come along the way, please type them in the chat so we can answer them afterwards. So all right, so to get started, a bit of an introduction to the NARCH program. The NARCH program was started in 2001 in collaboration with Indian Health Service, and the goal of the program was to support federally recognized American Indian, Alaska Native, or AIAN tribe and organization to build their capacity for doing health-related research. And they can partner with non-academic who are AIAN academic partners for their research collaboration. The program management was moved from IHS to NHGMS NIH in 2017. NARCH is a trans-NIH program. So each participating NIH institute, center, or office, they can support projects from different grant applications in the mission area of their institute, center, or office. So currently there are 28 NARCH active awards that are made to 19 travel entities in 14 states, which are shown here in green in the US map. As you may know, there are 574 federally recognized tribes. So this small number of awards, 28, represents a very small fraction of the total tribal entities who have the NARCH program. So goal is to improve this their participation of other tribal entities which are eligible into the NARCH program and fund more NARCH centers. You can check this NARCH award on the DRCB dashboard. The website is given at the bottom of the slide. Who these are these NARCH centers and what type of project they are supporting. So you can check them out at the DRCB website, the dashboard. Most of these NARCH centers, they partner with known AIAN academic partners to develop capacity and also collaboration for conducting research at their organization. For example, in Oklahoma, the NARCH by Cherokee Nation, they partnered with Oklahoma State University and Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation to build their tribal research capacity. Another example that I can refer to is the South Central Foundation, that's in Alaska, which is a tribally owned and operated health organization that partners with Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and University of Alaska, as well as national partners at the University of Washington, Mayo Clinic, and University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. So you can go to the website at the dashboard and check them, all these NARCH awards, what they are and what kind of projects they are funding or they are supporting currently. So to improve the efficacy of the program, the NARCH program, in meeting the health research needs of the AI/AN community, NIGMS completed a comprehensive NARCH program evaluation that culminated in a formal travel consultation in 2021. So travel consultation report and the feedback are available at the NIGMS website. That report was presented to the National Advisory General Medical Sciences Council in September 2021. So you can go on the website and read the complete report and the recommendation. So this slide at the bottom, it shows a summary of the inputs from the travel leaders. So that I'll just try to summarize here. The first one was to ensure that both research projects at the research infrastructure capacity building are primarily conducted by tribal nations and communities rather than by academic partner institutions. Secondly, to remove barriers to application process by reducing complexity of submission requirements, particularly for tribal nations or organizations that do not already hold NIH grants. Thirdly, to create opportunities for new applicants to learn more about the existing grantees through mentorship or collaboration on their proposal that they plan to submit. Another recommendation, the input that came from the travel consultation, was to ensure that reviewers who review these applications, they understand the importance of culture and language as research elements to examine health disparities, resilience, and dealing with trauma in Indian country. Another input that was there to support AI/AN training at all the stages, starting from high school, undergraduate, graduate, postdoc, and faculty level. And also the recommendation was to increase overall program funding for the NARCH program. So taking into account these recommendations and input provided by the travel consultation, the NARCH program was revamped to strengthen the program. And this new funding announcement was issued last July with the purpose to support health-related research, to support research career enhancement, and to support research infrastructure enhancement projects that are prioritized and led by AI/AN tribal entities. The next slide shows, next slide please. It shows the significant major changes that were included in this new funding announcement PAR-23-166. The first one was that the majority of the NARCH funds, they remain with the tribal entities rather than the known AI/AN partner organizations. Also, the process for applying for the applicants was streamlined in the new funding announcement. Thirdly, all the stages for career development were allowed in the funding announcement, including high school students. Also, for the review criteria, we incorporated the culturally appropriate language in the review guideline for the reviewers who are going to review these applications. Also, we increased the budget for the overall NARCH program and made it a 5-year award. earlier the NARCH award used to be a 4-year award. So we have made it now a 5-year award. And earlier the receipt date for the NARCH was every 2 years, then there was a gap, and again for 2 years now. So now we have made this funding announcement, have an annual application due date for the NARCH application. I'll go into more detail as we go through my presentation. So these are major changes that were put in the new notice of funding announcement for the NARCH program. So this slide shows the application due dates. The receipt date for the NARCH application is this year in July 8, 2024. And after that, there will be annual receipt dates for this application in 2025 and 2026. With the receipt date same as July 8 and for both the years. Once these applications come in, they will be reviewed sometime in November by the review panel, by Council for the Center for Scientific Review. And then they will go to the second level of review by the Council at NIGMS in January. Say for this year, they will go in January 2025. So earliest you can get the award for the NARCH program will be sometime in April, May of 2025. If you're planning to submit an application, it's encouraged that you submit a letter of intent. The letter of intent should be sent to Crystal Richards. She's a program officer in our division, and she just joined recently in our division. The letter of intent should include this information, which is listed on this slide in the bullet form. The title of the proposed activity, what the NARCH Center will do, the name and telephone number of the PD and the PI, the principal investigators. If there are any key personnel, they should be included in the letter, and which organization are going to participate in the NARCH Center. They should be included, and the number and title of this funding announcement that NARCH and the PAR-23-166. So they should be included, all these items on the letter of intent that you should submit at least 30 days before your application submission for the NARCH program. So who is eligible to apply for this? The tribal entities. The application organization must meet one of the following criteria which are listed on this slide. That organization should be a federally recognized tribe, or a tribal college or university, or a tribal health program, or a tribal organization or government. Also, a consortium of 2 or more tribal entities is allowed as long as all of them meet eligibility requirements. To further elaborate on the eligibility criteria for this organization, next slide, please. That an applicant organization must be eligible tribal entity and must be able to support a NARCH S06 award and its goal, what you want to propose. Also, these organizations, they should have the research administrative infrastructure to manage this multi-component grant. As I'll just mention in my next few slides, that this NARCH program is a multi-component. There are more than one component in the application. So that organization should have a research infrastructure to manage the multi-component grant. That organization, who is the applicant, they may partner with other eligible tribal entities as well as additional known AIAN organization. However, please note that the application must be from and the award must be made to a tribal entity. So this slide shows the eligibility criteria for the PDPI, the principal investigator. The principal investigator must have a primary appointment with the applicant organization. So those PIs who have special employment arrangement, such as inter-organizational personnel agreement among various federally recognized AIAN tribes, that's allowed for this application. Also, the multiple PIs application are allowed. There can be more than one PI on the application. However, all the MPI, the multi-PI, they must be from the eligible tribal entity. Please also note that the non-contact PDPI, there will be contact PI and there will be non-contact PI also. If there are multiple PI, he or she must have a primary appointment at an eligible tribal entity. So those partners who are not who don't have represent PI on the application, they are allowed, as I mentioned earlier. They can be current S06, the NARCH awardees, other tribal entities, or non-tribal entities. In terms of budget, the maximum budget that's allowed for the NARCH program is $1.3 million per year in direct cost, and that can be requested for up to 5 years. And for the $1.3 million, at least 60% or more of the budget must remain with the tribal entity. That's the applicant organization. And for those applications that include partner organizations that are not tribal entities, the direct cost of the subcontracts to those organizations combined must be 40% or less of the applicant's overall direct cost budget. So the third bullet basically is same thing, saying, the 60% or more the budget should stay with the tribal entity, the applicant organization, and the remaining 40%, up to 40% or less, that can go to the non AIA and academic partners. For this funding announcement, both new and resubmission application are allowed. If an S06 application, the NARCH application, is unsuccessful in the first attempt, the first time, they can resubmit in the following year. So that resubmission is allowed. In terms of number of applications that can be submitted in response to this notice of funding announcement, up to 2 applications for the same due date are allowed, provided that there is no overlap between the various components that you propose in the application. And there can be 2, for the next 2 bullets basically are, there can be 2 scenarios that if a tribal entity has already one active NARCH S06 award, they can submit one more application in response to this new announcement. However, there should not be any overlap between the current NARCH award and the proposed new application. If a tribal entity has 2 already active NARCH S06 award currently, they cannot receive a new NARCH award. However, they can submit application in anticipation of the expiration of the one or both of its current NARCH S06 awards. However, please note that a new award can only be made after a current NARCH S06 award has ended. Those NARCH which are in the no cost extension currently, they are also considered as active awards. So even you have no cost extension, you will not be given the new award in response to this announcement, and if you get successful in the competition. So this should also completely terminate before you can get the award in response to the this new funding announcement. So if you plan to submit more than one application in response to this funding announcement, you should discuss this, your plan to submit with the program officer at NAGMS, who's listed on this announcement. So in terms of the program description, an application must include components like overall and the administrative core. These 2 components are required cores, overall and the administrative core. In addition, the application must also include one or more of the components which are listed on the slide. That can include research projects, that can be up to 3 projects in the application, a pilot project program, that may be 1 program, a career enhancement project up to 2, and the research and infrastructure enhancement project up to 2. On the slide, it's also shown kind of in the figure that there are green box center in the circle, the administrative core, which is required core, and the 4 components which are kind of optional, but you have to submit at least one component to support the activity for the program. The NARCH application does not require any overarching scientific theme. Rather, the research project can be in any research focus area that address the health need of the AIN community. So you can have up to 3 projects, but they can be all different research areas that address the health need that's allowed. So there's no kind of common, overarching scientific theme that's required for an overall NARCH application. So I'm going to go into a more description of these components that I just mentioned on the previous slide. The first one is an overall component. For the NARCH application, this is a required component, and the maximum page limit is for this is 6 pages. So this component should describe the overall vision, what the vision is of the NARCH center that you're proposing, and who are the organizations that are going to participate in the NARCH program, what their roles are, who are the lead, and who are the partner organizations. They should also describe the current state of the health-related research enterprise at the applicant organization. And if you are also having a partner, also describe what is the research enterprise status of those partnering organizations. The application should describe the structure of the organization, the status of the grant administration infrastructure, and the plans to address the area of weakness. If there's some need or gaps are there, how they will be met through this NARCH program. If you include in the application partner organization, to describe the past collaboration, if you had any before, and what was the accomplishment for those with those partner organizations. And if you're proposing now in the current application, describe how this partner organization will contribute to the proposed center, in the application that you're proposing. If you plan to also include a component on the career enhancement or capacity building, you should describe the plans, how you want to ensure that the agenda for this career development, the research capacity building will be addressed in the application. So for overall component, you can include under this component letter of support. These are kind of required from each lead or partner organization that will participate on the application. The letters can include form, travel resolution, or travel letter of support for the application and any specific components. All projects which are proposed in the application should have the approval of the travel government with jurisdiction over each travel entity who are involved in the center. If an application includes partner organization, so include a letter or resolution of support from each organization. The letter should describe clearly the role and commitment of the partner organization in the letter or the resolution. Also, each letter should include the proposed center's name, the grant application title, and the title of any relevant component or the project that you're proposing in the application. You should attach all the letter of support in the overall component. As I'll describe in the next few slides, for the other components, you cannot include the letter of support under those components, but all the letter of support should be included in the overall component. So I'll say a few words about the data management sharing plan. This is an NIH-wide policy that was implemented nearly a year ago with effect from January 25, 2023. The purpose is to emphasize good data management practices and set the expectations for maximizing the sharing of scientific data that's generated under NIH-funded research awards. The data management sharing plan can be 1 to 2 page long, and it must be included in the overall component in the other attachment only if you propose research projects or a pilot project program in the NARCH application. So one data management sharing plan is required per application. Even there are more than one research projects and also a pilot project program, you can include only one DMS plan per application. So this plan should cover the scientific data that's expected to be generated from all the components. You can use a language as given here on the second bullet. The data we expect to generate from the proposed research projects are in following categories, and then describe the plan to share the data. Do not organize the DMS plan by the research project number or the research project leader name. NIH has some description of the elements, what to include, and as a template on this website, scientific data sharing web page. So you can go there and look at some of the description of the elements and the template that you can use that. If you anticipate any foreseeable limitation on data sharing, for example, for the projects involving AI/AN participant data and our engagement with AI/AN tribe, like travel approval, travel sovereignty, and privacy consideration, or travel community review, you can mention that. NIH published a supplemental notice regarding the DMS plan for AI/AN population. So you can look at that for more details. The next component, which is required component, is the administrative core that manages the NARCH award and also coordinates the center's activities. This slide lists some of the activities, responsibilities that administrative core conducts. They handle budget, prepare and submit the program and financial reports, and also ensure that all the activities are compliant with the federal regulation. Admin core also organize and coordinate the center-wide activities such as seminar and workshop and other career development activities, the programs for the center. They also coordinate the activity or the proposed components that you propose in the application by working with the leader of those components. This core also coordinates the evaluation of the center, how the center is doing, and so all the metrics and the benchmarks are kind of managed by this core as well. Administrative core budget should not exceed more than $100,000 in direct costs per year. And under this component, you should not include any lateral support. So all the lateral support should go under the overall component, as I mentioned previously. The next two slides will have only the optional components. If you think that there is a need for those projects, you can include them, you can propose them in your application. First one is the research projects. These are optional, as I mentioned. And each research project can have up to 6 pages. And you can propose, you can support up to 3 research projects in an application. The maximum budget for each research project that's allowed is $200,000 in direct cost per year per project for a maximum of 5 years. If the research project is a clinical trial, then you can propose higher budget for the research project, and it should be well justified. The research project, for example, should focus on the issues that are related to the AI/AN health, such as what are the factors that contribute to a condition that impact the AI/AN health, what are the mechanisms that underlie disease or conditions that are prevalent in AI/AN communities, and also the project that develop, implement, and evaluate the intervention that address health challenges in the AI/AN community. So there are some of the examples, listed here. But if there are any other projects that you think are relevant for your community, they can be proposed in the application. The research strategy, the research plan for this component should include general strategies, what are the approaches, the timeline for the project, the milestone, etc. Instead of giving specific details on the experimental detail or protocol, focus on the general strategy and the approach. Also incorporate any culturally appropriate approach and methodology for the research project that you're proposing. If the research project is a clinical trial, you must include the study design, methods, and the intervention that will be used in the clinical trial. If the investigator who is proposing this research project and this research project has human subjects, provide a plan to address any gap, any need for the leader, for the investigator into scientific and regulatory knowledge that's needed to complete the study. How that gap will be filled by mentoring or by further training for the investigator. The investigator, known as RP, the research project leader, he or she should have expertise in the subject area under which the project is being proposed, and they may not receive funding for another research project or the pilot project under the same center. So they can get funding only for one research project at one time. Again, this component should not include any letter of support. They all should be included in the overall component. The other optional component is the pilot project program. This can also have up to 6 pages. So this is a program that you had proposed in your application to manage kind of internal funding mechanism to support any exploratory or preparatory research as a pilot project, which can address any question in the health-related research. You do not include any specific pilot project in the application. However, you have to describe a program, how you're going to solicit those pilot project application from the organization, how they can be reviewed, and how they can be selected for funding, and how they will be mentored, after they are funded. So they should describe in the application a program to support this pilot project program in the application. Those participants, the investigators who participate in the pilot project program, they can be early stage investigators or new investigators as defined by NIH. And those investigators should not simultaneously lead more than one pilot project or a research project that's supported by the NARCH award. The person who manages overall the program, the pilot project program, or pilot project director, he or she is not eligible to receive a pilot project funding from the NARCH award. They should have, however, experience in mentoring, health-related research, and knowledge in culturally appropriate research approaches. So they can mentor those investigators who will be funded with a pilot funding. The budget for the pilot project program the allowed maximum is $200,000 in direct cost per year for all the activities and the pilots. And each pilot can be up to funded $65,000 in direct cost per year. And it can be renewed once more in during the 5-year cycle. So total of 2 years of support can be given for a pilot project in the center. Again, the no letter of support should be included under this component as well. If there are any supporting letters are there for this component, they should go in the overall component. The next component, which is optional, is the career enhancement projects. A career enhancement project supports program to enhance knowledge and the research skills of the current and the next generation of health researchers. You can support up to 2 career enhancement projects in the application. The research strategy of research plan should include the criteria, how they're going to get the participant to participate on this in the project, how they will be recruited, selected, and voted for this career development projects. What kind of program will be offered to them? Who the target participant? What kind of curriculum or program will be included in the project? What approaches will be used, and the timeline, and the anticipated outcomes for this career for the participant. they should be all described as a in the plan for this component. Also, you should include the activities that can further enhance and incorporate the quantitative and computational skills for these participants, so they can have enhance their skills in this space also as well. The leader who leads this project, career enhancement project, he or she should have experience in mentoring, career development, research, and knowledge of the culturally appropriate research and education approaches. The maximum budget that's allowed for this particular component is $200,000 in direct cost per year per project. Again, no lateral supports are allowed in this component as well. The research infrastructure enhancement project, which is again an optional component, if there's a need for this enhancing the research infrastructure for your organization to conduct the research, you can propose this component in the NARCH application. So up to 6 pages can be used for this component, and you can propose up to 2 research infrastructure enhancement project in the NARCH application. So these kind of projects can be to support like technical or methodological course to develop and strengthen technical capacity that's needed for the health-related research, or you need any bio or data repository as a research resources for the research project that you're proposing that can be used. So you can propose that kind of a project as well. If you need to improve or enhance the research administration infrastructure, such as tribal institutional review board, IRB, you can propose that activity as well under this project to further improve the infrastructure so that you can conduct the study for those projects that involve human subjects. So the research plan should describe what the needs are for why you're proposing this component, what the needs are, how you're going to design this, what the timeline is, and how it's going to manage the management plan, and also how it's going to coordinate with the other program. If it's you're proposing for the IRB enhancement, how it's going to help the proposed research project in the NARCH center. The leader who will lead this component, they should have expertise in the appropriate area of scientific capacity building. If they're proposing in the bio or data science repository, he or she should have some experience in that area. Or if they want to improve, enhance the IRB part of the organization, they should have some experience in that space as well. The budget for this component that's allowed maximum is $200,000 in direct cost per year. And again, the no lateral supports are allowed in this component as well. So any lateral support, if it relates to any proposed components for the optional component, they should all go in the overall component. So this slide summarizes all the components that I've described to you. Just to recap, the 2 required components, the overall and the administrative core. Overall component, you should include all the lateral support for all the components in that under the overall component. Also, if you are proposing in the application research projects or the pilot project program, you will have to also submit a DMS plan, the data management sharing plan, and that should be also included in the overall component. The next are the optional components. At least one of the following components is required. If more than one, any combination is allowed. They can be research projects, a pilot project program, career enhancement projects, research infrastructure enhancement project. So at least one project is components required, and there can be any combination. You can have one research project and one career enhancement project and one research infrastructure enhancement project. Or you can have 2 research projects, and a pilot project program. Depending upon what the needs are of your organization, of the center, you can propose that in the NARCH application. So as I mentioned, at the bottom of the slide, I listed some of the bullets in bold. The data management sharing plan is required if a research is proposed as a research project or a pilot project program. If these research projects involve human subjects and clinical trial information need to be included in the application. If these research projects are going to be involving vertebrate animals, you should include the vertebrate animal section for these projects in the application. If the research project will use any key biological or chemical resources, you should include a plan to how you're going to authenticate these and identify and ensure the validity of these resources. For the select agent research, if the proposed research will involve any select agent research, you should describe the plan, what the select agent is, what procedure you will be using to monitor, and the plan for biosafety, biocontainment, and security of the select agent. And a resource sharing plan should be also included if they are going to be developing some resources in the proposed application. So next couple of slides, I'm going to cover some of the review process, how it takes place, once the application is sent to NIH. The first step is to go administrative review. So as I mentioned earlier, all the applications, they come to Center for Scientific Review at NIH. And they go through the administrative review by NIGMS program officer and the Center for Scientific Review. If the applications are deemed non-compliant or non-responsive, or there any eligible partners are there, they will be withdrawn without review. So to avoid all this, you should read and follow the notice of funding announcement for the NARCH, which is the PAR-23-166. All the instructions very carefully. When you apply, make sure that all the PIs are eligible, and also make sure that all the submitting organizations, they are eligible, and also allow few days prior to the deadline so that if any error comes up, you can check your application and make sure that those corrections are made on time. So once the applications are in and they are compliant, they go through the scientific review. The scientific review officer, they put together a review panel, and their applications are divided among the special emphasis panel. SRO, the scientific review officer, he or she does the reviewer orientation meeting. At this meeting, same material is given to all the reviewers, including the guidance about reviewing the research on the travel organization. So those reviewers are trained in that training as well. For each application, for each component, the reviewers are assigned by the SRO, and at least 2 reviewers are assigned to each component of the application. In how it takes place, the process, the assigned reviewers for each component, they present comments on each component, and then the panel discusses it. All the panel members, they vote individually on every component of the application and provide individual impact score. So each component gets their own overall impact score. And each component is reviewed on its own merit, and it may be selected for funding, even the other components are not. So if you have proposed 3 components and 2 are done, got very good impact score, and third one did not get, so 2 can be picked, for funding for that application. So this is some advice to all the applicants. You should read, as I mentioned before, the entire notice of funding announcement very carefully. Complete all the required registration for the submitting organization on time. It can take up to 4 to 6 weeks for the complete registration of the to submit the application to NIH. You should pay more attention to the section 5 of the notice of funding announcement, which has review criteria, and make sure that those criteria are being addressed in your application, because the review panel also, they get the critique elements which contain the same criteria and questions that are being asked in the review section for the funding announcement. In terms of letter of support, do not duplicate letter of support and try to avoid including letter of support that do not add any substance to the overall application. Because if you include those kind of letters, it can also limit the pool of reviewers, and usually it also can annoying for the reviewers who review the application, because they don't add any substance to the overall application what you're trying to do. This item is optional. You can use the PHS assignment form to indicate the expertise that's needed, but do not suggest the reviewer's name. You can mention the expertise what you need, what's needed for your application, but do not suggest the reviewer's name. However, you can provide the name of those who should not review your application for some reason you have. Who should you contact and when? Before submission, before submitting the application, and after the summary statement is ready. Summary statement is a critique by the review panel that they share with the SRO, and then SRO releases the summary statement as the overall critique for the application. So before the submission and after the summary statement is released, you should contact the program officer for your application. And after submission and before the review meeting, you should contact the scientific review officer who will be listed on the funding announcement. This slide just to show the expectations. Once the award is made, your application came in and it was reviewed very well, it was funded. So after that, there are certain expectations are there that you have to meet in the post-award program and the reporting requirement. You have to submit the annual progress report and the financial report every year. So these are websites are there that you can find more information on that one. So for example, the annual progress report, the RPPR, Research Performance Progress Report, is due 60 days before the end of the budget period. Also, if you propose in your application a pilot project program, so you need to have prior approval by NIGMS before you can start the pilot project in the application in your center. So that will happen only after a year or two that you have proposed a program in your application, and once it's funded, and then you decide after a year that you have some new investigator who you would like to fund for the pilot project, and they can get some money for a year or two and get some results before they can fully apply for the research project or other mechanism to NIH. So once you have identified the project and the investigator, then you have to submit to NIGMS for prior approval before that investigator can start the project at the center. So these are kind of post-award management and requirement for the NARCH award. With that, I'll stop and thank you for your attention. So we'll be happy to address your questions.
Thanks so much, Krishan, for that. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen, and we'll go ahead and we will answer the questions now. So let me just, now, of course, I have managed to lose the chat box. So there is a Q&A and there is a chat box. I prefer you to put them in the chat box than the Q&A like you've done already, because that means everybody can easily see them. So thanks for doing that. So the first question is, will these slides and the slides from the webinar last week be shared? Yes, those slides will be up on our website very soon. Slides go up and then the recordings take us a little bit longer. So it takes us about a week, sometimes a little shorter, to get the slides up, and then probably 2 weeks to post webinars, and they will be on the NARCH site. The next question is, how can we budget for the pilot project program if the NARCH does not know if the pilot project will be with a tribal entity or a non-tribal entity? Christy, would you like to answer that one?
So that is a tricky thing that we run into with a lot of our grants that have pilot project programs. You can budget the direct cost as requested for the total, and then you can request your F&A rate on that amount. depending on where the pilot project is funded, you would then be able to rebudget funds if their F&A rate is higher or lower. It's not a perfect system, but because we don't know where the pilot projects will go, it can be an estimate at that time on F&A.
That was a really good question and a terrific answer. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
And thanks for Nikki for asking. Okay, other questions? No, y'all probably want some time to think about your projects before you start writing. But there were some significant changes, so I'm glad we had this webinar so that you got a very clear idea of what those changes are and about what you can and can't do in your applications this year. Here's a question regarding a statement of overlap with prior NARCH grant. Overall in funding or overlap in similar content?
I can verbally explain that. I meant.
Sure, Nikki, thanks.
Sure, sorry. And I was trying to type fast. And so the question is, there were several statements made in the beginning of the presentation about assuring no overlap. Was that intended to be relevant to no overlap in funding periods, or was it also in relationship to overlap in similar content? Because I could see a next round of a NARCH requesting funding to expand on something they had done in the previous round. So it sort of looks like overlap because it's a similar concept, but it's obviously not exactly the same. So I didn't know if the overlap applied to just financial overlap or also content overlap.
Christian, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I mean, yeah, there should be, I think, the overlap, what I meant, by the, components and what they are going to do, what activities, for a research project, there should be no scientific overlap. So that also, translates to the money also, the funding part as well. If there's overlap between what you are doing that, what you're proposing, so there will be, of course, overlap between the funding as well. So what I meant, the scientific overlap.
Yeah, yes, it's mostly scientific overlap. If you have two NARCHs running at the same time concurrently, then you'd have to be concerned also about financial overlap. If you're submitting a NARCH as kind of the next, to be funded after one ends, that's a little different. But you can't, NIH has the rules. You can't submit the same science twice in the same funding cycle, and you can't get paid twice to do the same activity. So keep that in mind, and I think that will help you keep it all straight. Any other questions? You may either ask type it in, or you can unmute yourself, turn on your video if you'd like, and then go ahead and ask. Okay, well, once again, if you do end up thinking of questions you want to ask about the NOFO, for now, you're going to send those questions to Christian Arora. NIGMS is in the middle of restructuring its branches, so we'll be adding a new branch chief, and both the NARCH and the CTR programs, clinical and translational research programs, will go into a new branch. And at that point, it's likely that we'll reassign the contact person to be someone else for this grant, but always check the funding opportunity announcement for that information. And then after you submit, of course, whoever is assigned as your program officer. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and thank you so much for attending this. I hope you found it helpful. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you everyone for joining.